First impressions are everything. It's what gives you a good idea of what you're getting into with any type of media. When it comes to Ben 10, the first impression of an alien is pretty important to help establish who that alien is and how they work. I thought it would be a fun idea to make a tier list of every debut of an Omnitrix alien. I want to rank them based off how fun the scene is and how well the scene establishes how that alien works. My opinion of some aliens are higher than others, but being a favorite will not influence the ranking for this tier list. I also want to specify that only first appearances will be ranked, so first reappearances like the classic aliens returning in UAF will not be counted. In a case where an alien's debut episode has them used more than once like Cannonbolt or Big Chill, I'll rank them based off the first time they appear, so it's more fair when comparing to every other alien. The last thing I want to clarify is that I'll be going by the original airing order, so for example, while you technically could say that Spider Monkey's debut is B-Knighted, I'm going to consider What Are Little Girls Made Of as his debut, as it's how it was originally aired. With all that out of the way, let's see how each alien performs at giving a good first impression. Since I want to go in order of when the aliens were introduced, we of course are going to start with the very first alien that Ben ever turns into, which is Heatblast. Heatblast's debut is in the first episode, and then there were 10, and his debut has 2 jobs: establishing Heatblast and what he is, and just how the Omnitrix works in general. We're going to only focus on the Heatblast aspect of that, and thankfully, this scene does a fantastic job. Heatblast's powers are established clearly and at a pretty quick pace. We see him shoot some fire projectiles, and the scene also exemplifies how his powers can lead to disaster quickly if not used with proper care. We also see Ben learn how to control Heatblast's pyrokinesis more intricately, like when he shoots a small amount of fire at Gwen's shoe to mess with her. And Heatblast creating a second forest fire to backfire the old one thanks to Grandpa Max's idea is a pretty creative solution. Heatblast's debut is iconic, it goes without saying. It's a fun scene and does a good job showcasing how Heatblast works, but does it deserve S tier for its iconic status? Honestly, given that I'm comparing this to every single alien debut in the entire franchise, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think it does. Don't get me wrong, it's a great scene and everything, but there's tons of more interesting debuts later on. With that, I think Heatblast's debut is gonna get a B tier. It's great, but there's a lot better. Next we have Wildmutt, whose first appearance also takes place in And Then There Were 10. His debut is fantastic. They take the time to go into detail on Wildmutt's unique features, mainly his lack of eyes. The first thing we see Wildmutt do is that he uses his sense of smell and vision to avoid Gwen's strike, which is such an insanely cool moment. We don't get too much action besides a little scuffle with some Vilgax drones, but this one shot is pretty sweet. If it wasn't for Wildmutt's scene being shorter than I'd hoped, I'd put this in S tier, but even with that in mind, I would say this one earns its way into A tier. Now we have Diamondhead, who also debuts in And Then There Were 10. While Heatblast and Wildmutt didn't get S tier, thankfully Diamondhead does. I already gushed about this scene heavily in my iconic Ben 10 Aliens video, but the amount of creative things Diamondhead does in this scene puts him at S tier alone. Especially the part where he saves Gwen by creating a mountain of spikes on his back, that scene is so fucking good. The reflecting maneuver to defeat the Vilgax drone is also a great showcase of creativity and quick adaptation on Ben's part. I knew Diamondhead would get S tier the minute I thought of this video idea. Last for the And Then There Were 10 debuts, we have my favorite of the original 10, Accelerate. Accelerate's scene is at the end of the episode, and it's fine. He showcases some speed to help clean up, and he also gets revenge on Cash and JT, which is pretty fun. But as a debut, it's nothing super exciting. It is at the end of the episode, so I can't give it too much flack, but this one's gonna go into C tier. It's nothing outright awful, which is better than some aliens we'll see later on in this list. Next we got Grey Matter, who debuts in Washington, BC. His scene just has him rummaging through the cereal aisle looking for a golden Sumo Slammer card until Gwen catches him. Grey Matter's most notable trait besides his size is his intelligence, which is not shown at all here, so there's not much to say. This one is easily the least exciting of the original 10 when it comes to their first appearance, so it's gonna get a D tier. Now we move on to Forearms, debuting in Washington, BC. I think his scene is pretty cool as we see Forearms' strength showcased to fight off a reanimated woolly mammoth. Seeing Forearms swing around the mammoth is pretty neat. Not to mention he times out while falling, creating a crater that's half the size of Queso. This scene's main issue is honestly that it's a bit short. Forearms can get a B tier. It does its job to establish who Forearms is and entertains the viewer well enough. Stinkfly is the last alien to debut in Washington, BC, and I think his scene is pretty good. Seeing him fly around to save Gwen from a mutant parrot was pretty cool, and the flying maneuvers are pretty sweet. And though his actual confrontation with Anima was pretty short, it was still pretty cool. I especially like the focus of Stinkfly using his slime against a T-Rex. Stinkfly can get a B tier. Overall, his debut was done well. Ripjaws' debut is in The Kraken, and his first appearance is pretty damn cool. The choreography during the underwater action scene is so good. We get some insane shots of Ripjaws and a really cool first look at his expansive jaw. Not to mention Ripjaws also channeling his inner Belmont. This one gets an A tier. It's not S tier material when I compare it to other aliens, but this debut is still really great. Upgrade's debut in Permanent Retirement is the weakest when it comes to the actual fight scenes. His scene is in the beginning of the episode, and besides merging with a truck for 5 seconds, we get no showcase of what his actual powers are. Upgrade's screen time is also less than a minute here, so sadly I gotta give this one a D tier. Perhaps that's a bit harsh for an opener that's irrelevant to the plot, but they could have done something with Upgrade here. All they do is have him in a truck where he shakes a little bit like when you try to mash out of a berry move in Smash Brothers. Last of the original 10 is Ghostfreak, who also debuts in Permanent Retirement. Ghostfreak's scene is thankfully better than Upgrade's, as we get a good showcase of his intangibility and his invisibility. The reaction of some old people witnessing an invisible Ghostfreak driving a golf cart, or Ghostfreak's reaction to a Limax eating a fly, this is just such a fun debut. It may not be an action scene, but the fact that it's entertaining is what really matters, not to mention they do a good job showcasing how Ghostfreak works. Ghostfreak is going to get a B tier for being fun if nothing else. Now we move on to the additional aliens of the Classic series. Whenever Ben gets a new alien, at least in Classic, it's usually treated as a pretty big deal, or at the very least, acknowledged as a milestone. And starting our list of additional aliens is Cannonbolt. Cannonbolt's introduction back then was such a crazy big deal. They introduced the fact that there's more than 10 aliens in the Omnitrix, and even the idea that there's possibly hundreds to thousands of more aliens we don't know about. So how did they go about introducing Ben's first new alien? Cannonbolt appears in the opening of the episode, The Big Tick. One thing that I love about this scene right off the bat is the fact that they really make you try to guess on what Cannonbolt's powers may actually be. Ben struggles to figure this out himself and even references Spider-Man in the process. It's not until the titular tick himself crashes onto Earth that we learn that Cannonbolt can roll into a ball. I love the fact that he does it like a defense mechanism without knowing what he was going to do, sort of like Basic Instinct. The rest of his screen time is Cannonbolt alongside Gwen and Grandpa Max talking to the tick's worshippers before Ben is knocked away. Lastly, he pinballs in the forest briefly before becoming human again. This scene is pretty iconic given it's Cannonbolt's debut and also the first time we get a new alien. Which by the way was because Gwen wanted a fucking cheeseburger. What can I say? She likes freckle bitches. Cannonbolt gets a much cooler scene later on in The Big Tick, but we're only going by the true first time the alien is used, so it's gonna get a B tier. This scene is more so to set up the potential Cannonbolt will show off later in the episode, and in that way, it does its job well. Next we have Wildvine. Wildvine's debut comes out of nowhere near the end of the episode Camp Fear. I heard the possible in-universe reason for this is because the mushroom aliens in this episode are also from the same planet as Wildvine, but I'm pretty sure that's been debunked, but I'm not sure though. I love that the first thing he does is create thorns all over his body, and also on the back of his fingers too. We also see him stretch his limbs, which is pretty fun, and some slicing action. I also love that Ben discovers Wildvine's seed bomb by accident due to him hanging on the ceiling. This scene is really cool, and Wildvine showed off a lot of capabilities in a brief amount of time, so he's gonna get an S tier. Wildvine has one of my favorite debuts in Classic. He has that random surprise factor and cool action. What's not to love? Our next batch of aliens are the Ben 10K trio, who all sadly only get seconds of action in the episode Ben 10,000. These aliens are Spitter, Buzzshock, and Arctiguana. They do get good utilization despite their short duration, but I can't rank all of them terribly high. Spitter just spits at Anemo and Vilgax, Buzzshock shocks Anemo for a second, and Arctiguana freezes Vilgax underwater to defeat him. Spitter is gonna get a D tier. He has like 12 seconds of screen time throughout the whole franchise, and his debut is like half of that. Not to mention, while Spitter's power isn't too bad of an idea, we do see this used with Stinkfly in a more interesting fashion. To Spitter's credit, he does what he needs to do, but it's too brief to enjoy for an alien Ben will get in the future. Buzzshock is also gonna get a D tier. Once again, the short time is the biggest issue. I'm gonna be a bit nicer to Arctiguana as he not only defeats Vilgax, but I find the use of Ice Breath more interesting. We also get a nice conversation between both Bens on what to name Arctiguana. I think Arctiguana has it better than Buzzshock and Spitter regarding their debut, so I'm going to give him a C tier. Our next group of aliens are also a trio, the iconic Halloween trio. First we have Blitzwolfer in the episode Ben Wolf. Blitzwolfer is a special case as his debut is technically one of the longest of Ben 10. That is, if we count the first few phases of Ben's incredibly slow transformation into Blitzwolfer. It is the most we get out of Blitzwolfer action, as we get a showcase of some of his strength when digging or fighting the werewolf, and we also get some nice scenes of his night vision and athleticism. When Ben does become Blitzwolfer, it is a pretty damn cool twist, so there is bonus points for that. But all we get after that is 2 jumps and a single sonic howl before Ben turns back into human. Never to use Blitzwolfer for another 6 years. The twist of Ben getting Blitzwolfer is easily the coolest part of the debut. The multiple phases are pretty cool, but when we get Blitzwolfer properly, there's not much to see. I'll give credit that the Sonic Howl Ben does is focused on pretty well and is pretty badass, but it can only help so much, so I'm gonna give Blitzwolfer a B tier. If we just had a bit more, I would have loved to give Blitzwolfer an A or maybe even an S. It's such a cool twist, but the payoff after the reveal really knocks down the rank a bit. Now we're on to my favorite alien, Snare-oh. I'm sure I don't say that enough throughout my Ben 10 videos. Snare-oh may be my favorite alien in the series, but does that mean I'm gonna give him an automatic S tier? As much as I love to, I want to be as unbiased as possible. With that in mind, I really do enjoy Snare-oh's debut. I expected something really fun given they blue ball you in Underwraps where Ben unlocks Snare-oh but accidentally turns into Upgrade when trying to become him. I'm happy to say that when he finally does show up in the episode The Return, it's pretty entertaining. Ben struggles at first to use Snare-oh's powers, which is a nice detail as it emphasizes his lanky design and long bandages. When he does use his powers efficiently, it's awesome. We get stretchy action and cool as fuck choreography. I love this scene so much. And while it's not really action related, I do like the scene where Grandpa Max mistakes Ben for the evil mummy for a second. As much praise as I give in this scene, and as much as I want to give this an S tier, I think with no bias in mind, I'm giving Snare-oh's debut an A tier. And my main reason for giving an A tier over S tier is the fact that when I compare Snare-oh's debut to the other aliens in this tier list, I don't think he'll measure up with the other S tiers. But Snare-oh and everything will always be S tier in my heart. Our last of the Halloween trio is Frankenstrike, debuting in the episode Be Afraid of the Dark. He easily gets the most time to shine of the Halloween trio, as we get an awesome fight scene against the Scare, Dr. Victor, and the Mummy in space. We get some awesome use of electrokinesis and some electromagnetism as well. I especially love this one moment where Frankenstrike launches off a floating metal into a slamming punch. That shit is so fucking cool. Frankenstrike gets an easy S tier. It's a shame that him alongside the other Halloween aliens didn't return in Classic. I know that's said constantly when the Halloween trio is mentioned by a Ben 10 fan, but it's for good reason. These aliens are just so fucking cool, and they just don't capitalize on that. Now we're up to Upchuck, whose debut is in the Season 3 finale, The Visitor. Upchuck's debut is pretty neat as we get some fun moments of Upchuck eating parts of the drone and shooting projectiles back out. The action looks great, but it's also not terribly long. I like how they put a lot of effort into how Upchuck works and how his tongues move and everything, and they did an overall good job introducing Upchuck, but the highest I'm going to give him is a B tier. Our last few aliens for the Classic series debut in the final season, so hopefully they make the most out of their limited screen time in their debuts. Starting off with our last few Classic aliens is Ditto, a fan favorite. Ditto's first appearance is in Divided We Stand, where he's used 3 times. But of course, we're only going to talk about the first time Ben becomes Ditto. The first time we see Ditto, Ben unlocks him by complete accident and fights a mutant seagull at a beach. I love that Ben finds out about Ditto's clone creating ability by complete accident when the seagull tries to drag him away. I wonder if this is how Splixons would survive a Panuncian attack. I like how both Dittos uses the environment to their advantage to defeat the seagull, showing that while Ditto isn't particularly strong, he can still find creative solutions, which he does do in future appearances. Ditto's first appearance is pretty great and is gonna get an A tier. Guy is our next alien, and while I personally prefer Ben vs the -10 Part 2 as his debut, I am going by airing order, so his first appearance by that logic is Ben 10's Secret of the Omnitrix, specifically the Gold Edition. Comparing the two, Secret of the Omnitrix is easily the more fulfilling scene, as we get a lot more time of Guy showing what he's capable of. I do wish that his chest eye opening for the first time got a lot more focus, but the laser is still pretty cool. And we do get one moment where the eye does have focus later on, so there is that. I also love this flipping maneuver to grab a support beam to shoot a laser at a distance. I do wish we had a moment of his eyes fusing in some ice lasers like in Ben 10 vs the -10 Part 2, but this scene was still done pretty well. I think that Guy is gonna get a B tier. Waybig is the final alien in Classic, which feels appropriate given how important of an alien he actually is. His debut is at the end of Secret of the Omnitrix, and it should be no surprise that this goes into S tier. Before I even go over Waybig's debut, I want to talk about how Azimuth, the creator of the Omnitrix himself, gives Ben this alien. That just makes this debut even more badass from that perspective. I love the fact that they have a big shadow overlooming to the eventual reveal of Waybig. That is such a great way to introduce him. Seeing him tower over everything and overpower Vilgax is so satisfying given all the shit Vilgax gave Ben throughout the Classic series. Especially when Waybig does that baseball pitch to throw Vilgax into space. Easily one of the most iconic debuts of a Ben 10 alien. I feel like almost anyone can agree that this deserves an S tier. Now we move on to the Alien Force 10. Alien Force took the debuts of their aliens more seriously when it came to exemplifying each alien's different abilities. And our first alien, Swampfire, thankfully does not disappoint. Swampfire is the first alien Ben turns into an Alien Force in the episode Ben 10 Returns Part 1. I love that Swampfire's first moments isn't even any special ability. It's just raw strength using a street lamp to knock out a fucking truck. Swampfire is that fucking alien. My favorite part is the fact that the very first power we actually do see as Swampfire is his regeneration. The way it's animated, the music, Ben's reaction, again, Swampfire is just that fucking alien. I love this moment so much. We do get to see some fire, which is neat and all, but the cooler part is when Swampfire takes on Kevin. Kevin's arm getting stuck in Swampfire's plant body and Swampfire sprouting out of the ground to perform a sneak attack is great. Swampfire quickly shows off why he can be an absolutely busted alien, especially considering what we see him do later on in the show, so Swampfire is easily going to get an S tier. Echo Echo's debut is in Ben 10 Returns Part 2. And it's okay. Echo Echo is used in this episode to fight off a robotic dragon. We do see him create some clones, and his supersonic screams are powerful and everything, but he really doesn't do a whole lot. Now if his debut was his fight with Argent and Kevin's big score, that would be an easy S tier, but for this episode, maybe a hot take, I'm not sure, but Echo Echo is gonna get a C tier. The long sonic scream to destroy the Mecha Dragon is the only thing keeping it from being a D tier or lower. Also, watching Echo Echo's first appearance reminded me on how glad I am that they stopped making Echo Echo talk like this. That shit would have gotten old fast. Humungousaur, you may be a bland alien, but as I said in my video about you, you used to be cool, and your debut in Ben 10 Returns Part 2 really shows it off. Sure, he gets his ass kicked by the hybrid, but that's to show off how ruthless and tough the hybrid is. The second half of Humungousaur's debut, where he grows 60 feet and barely stops a ship from destroying a hospital, is phenomenal. It has such amazing music and intensity. Like, I genuinely love this scene. Humungousaur may lack a lot of things, but a good first impression is not one of them, so he makes his way to a surprisingly generous A tier. Jetray debuts in Everybody Talks About the Weather, where he chases after Alan Albright. I like the fast pacing and different angles we see both characters fly at. And while it's not exclusive to this specific scene, I love the music. Jetray shows off everything he has at a general level besides his swimming ability. We see super speed and neuroshock lasers. I love that for the final blow he uses his tail laser as a surprise to catch Alan off guard. I do like this debut, but I'm gonna give Jetray a B tier. Big Chill debuts in Kevin's big score. He is used twice, but the scene he first appears in is a chase scene with Kevin. Big Chill does use his ice breath and intangibility in efficient ways, but he also becomes invisible, something he actually isn't able to do. I can't lie, having this in his debut when it's something he can't do is such a huge misstep. I don't know how that happens. Thankfully this scene is entertaining enough, so it's not like I'm gonna be too harsh, but Big Chill gets a C tier. I am more of a fan of his second scene against Volcanus. Chromastone may be one of my favorite aliens of all time, but I sadly can't praise his debut. I wish it was the Gauntlet. That's one of my all-time favorite Chromastone moments, but his actual debut is in All That Glitters, which is a pretty ass debut. He conducts electricity against a zombified girl, and then leaves like he's fucking Proto-Man. It has the upgrade problem where they don't clearly establish Chromastone's powers and it's incredibly brief. Chromastone, I'm sorry, but D tier you go. Next is Brainstorm, who debuts in Peer Pressure. I love this scene, from Brainstorm's intellect making him Brainstorm a name, for an alien he's using for the first time, to his use of electricity via projectiles and the force field. Brainstorm's first appearance is wicked. I also love that he can create a force field for others, like when he saved Julie from being shot. Also, Brainstorm entering a porta potty shouldn't be as comedic as it is to me, but it is. I'm weird like that. Brainstorm gets an A tier. Now we have Spider Monkey, who debuts in What Are Little Girls Made Of? Spider Monkey does some neat stuff in the scene, like his webbing in efficient ways and everything, and I especially love when he uses it in combination with Gwen's mana projectiles. But he doesn't do terribly much. But I still think it's fine, so he's gonna get a B tier. My favorite of the Alien Force debuts besides Swampfire has got to be Goop in the episode The Gauntlet. Goop is used to fight a Techodon, and I can't lie, the animation is a big part of why I love this debut so much. I mean, look at him, it's so fluid. I love how when the Techodon swats at Goop, his body splatters in place due to his artificial gravity. Goop also basically inflating the Techodon on some fetish shit is also a pretty creative way to defeat a robot in Ben 10. Goop gets an S tier. I absolutely adore this debut. Last for the Alien Force 10 is Alien X, who is used to stop a flooding dam. First off, Ben was low-key dumb in this scene. I know we eventually needed to see Alien X and everything, but for a dam that's flooding, wouldn't it make more sense to go Big Chill to freeze the water? Why risk it on a new alien that may or may not do the job? Anyways, as for Alien X's debut, it's in the episode X equals Ben plus 2. Alien X uses his powers to reverse the damage done to the dam, and while it seems Alien X may just be the immediate go-to alien from now on, he is unfortunately unable to move or respond to anyone. The rest rest of Alien X's screen time is just Ben arguing with Bellicus and Serena, the other two personalities within Alien X. They explain that Alien X cannot do anything unless the two of them and Ben agree on an action. This gives Alien X a drawback to all of his unlimited power, which is a limit, but I don't know how else to word it. And I do want to mention that I do find the fact that Alien X is sticking out of the trunk stiff as a sarcophagus funny as fuck. The most interesting thing about Alien X is his drawback. It really does make Alien X more interesting than the whole busted super strong OP character. But considering the buildup of where Alien X is coming, it is kind of a letdown. Because of that, Alien X is gonna get a C tier. I like some stuff about it, but it could have and should have been more. Alien Force only gives us 3 additional aliens before Ultimate Alien. The first of those aliens being Lodestar, who debuts in the episode Simple. I already went over why in some ways Lodestar being treated as a completely new alien doesn't make a lot of sense in my Lodestar video, so I won't go over why here, but I will acknowledge it for anyone who might bring it up. As for the scene itself, it does what it needs to. Lodestar shows off magnetism by both pulling in the red team's guns and repelling the guns back at the army as a defensive tactic. We also get this cute frame of Lodestar sitting. I fucking love this frame. Lodestar is one of my top 3 aliens, and I'd love to give him a high rank, but this scene isn't too long or action-packed, but it's still good, so he's gonna get a B tier. Next is Nanomech. Like Waybig, his debut is in a movie, which is Alien Swarm in his case. I'm not gonna lie, this debut low-key sucks. Nanomech is a cool alien, but the action and pacing here is kind of ass. I can barely tell what's going on with the shaking in some of these scenes. The dark background doesn't blend terribly well either, but maybe that's a homage to the dark as fuck backgrounds of early Alien Force. No, but seriously, for a new alien, it's a cool concept and everything, but my god, this camera work. Was Armadillo behind the scenes? Did someone use the Earth Orb in Mystery of the Emblem? Is Robotnik fucking with Marble Garden again? I do love seeing Nanomech's adaptation ability, but it is a shame that it never comes back. I'm gonna be a bit harsh here, but Nanomech is gonna get a D tier. I was thinking F, but the transition from Ben to Nanomech is pretty cool, and the adaptation moment is genuinely cool despite the shaking camera. The last of our Alien Force additionals is Rath, who is a special case because his debut is an episode focused on him. That episode being Con of Rath. He has the longest debut by far, as Ben is Rath once for nearly the entire episode. So let's see, funny Rath dialogue, fighting with both a mix of badass and funny execution, and that ending where Rath lunges into Jared's stomach and threatens him if he eats the baby Tiffin again. I wonder what rank he's gonna get. Yeah, this is an S tier. I don't really think I need to elaborate on why. Ultimate Alien thankfully did give us plenty of additional aliens, but their execution was lacking to put it in brief terms. Among these additionals are the Andromeda 5, aliens whose powers revolve around a certain element. These elements being water, earth, fire, air, and electricity. The first Andromeda alien that Ben uses is Water Hazard in Too Hot to Handle. Water Hazard's first appearance has 2 things really going for it. One is that Ben disguises himself as Bivalvin, a neat benefit the Omnitrix, or in this case the Ultimatrix, has, but we don't see too often. The other is that the fight against Pandor has some great shots and animation. Overall, Water Hazard's first appearance is pretty good, and makes its way into A tier. Next is Amphibian, who debuts in the episode Fused. Amphibian is a special case as his first appearance has Ben and Rad fused in one body, hence the name of the episode. He really doesn't do a whole lot besides argue with Rad inside his body, and he barely does any fighting or electrical attacks. Sadly, the really cool stuff that Amphibian can do is exemplified by Rad, so that won't be considered for Amphibian's rank, which I'm going to put in C tier. Armadillo is my favorite of the Andromeda 5, and he debuts in the episode Hero Time to fight some Computron minions. His scene is really short, but he does put in some work. It's nice that by Ultimate Alien, alien debuts can be treated more casually due to how many aliens Ben has by now, but that sadly means at best, Armadillo's gonna get a C tier. Terraspin debuts in the episode Reflected Glory to fight a giant robot. I love that to defeat the robot, he grabs the machine and spins in place on his back, a neat idea given that he's a turtle-like alien. It's small to some, but it is a pretty creative use of his powers, so I kinda want to put this in B tier. Energy is the last of the Andromeda 5 that Ben uses, debuting in the episode The Forge of Creation. First off, waiting 16 episodes to get an alien marketed for a new Ben 10 show is fucking abysmal. What the fuck were they thinking? And second off, this scene is kinda mad regarding Energy's utilization. Energy fights a young Ben as Heatblast, but he just shoots one laser and is knocked back once. A part of me wishes that Energy stopped Heatblast outright given that he's immune to fire, but we sadly don't get that. This debut feels like a whack payoff for such a long wait and is sadly going to get a D tier. After the Andromeda 5, Ultimate Alien gave us 5 new aliens for its final season, but not till the later half, so they didn't get much time to shine. The question is if they made a good first impression with the little time that they did have. The first of these aliens being Fast Track. His debut is in basic training, where he saves Magister Hulka and Tak from being blown up by a fusion bomb. This scene does have a little bit of an impact as it led to a lot of mystery. We didn't get to hear his name or his voice. We just know that he's blue and fast like Accelerate. I know he gets a ton of flack, but I myself am a fast track defender, so I don't mind his existence. As far as his debut goes, the mystery factor is neat and all, but it is still a really simple scene, so fast track is gonna get a C tier. Chameleon debuts and Prisoner 775 is missing. He is used after Ben scans the prisoner at the end of the episode. He poses, he makes jokes about his name being overkill, and then he leaves awkwardly like he got caught watching questionable porn. Chameleon's debut is nothing to write home about. It's not bad, but it's also not anything either, so I'm gonna have to give this one an F tier. Shock Squatch may only be an Omniverse when it comes to Ben 10, but he is technically a UAF alien, as he first appears in the Generator Rex crossover. His debut is nice and all, but it's also really short, and considering that we have plenty of electrical aliens at this point already, it's not that interesting because it's something we've seen other aliens do. Because of that, I can only give Shock Squatch a C rank. In Omniverse, he proves how sick he can be, but for this debut, it doesn't really help his case. Edel's first appearance is in A Night to Remember. He appears like he's gonna do something and then gets one-shotted. This wouldn't be an issue if it was any other alien, but a brand new one? It doesn't help that Edel also ended up being a redundant alien due to Upchuck. Yeah, this is the easiest F tier of the video, it's not even a question. Clockwork's first appearance is in the episode Inspector 13, but with Gwen instead of Ben. I'm not gonna count Ben 10,000 Returns as he doesn't actually physically show up. By that logic, anytime a hologram appeared, it would count as an appearance. Clockwork is in the back of Kevin's car as Kevin as Wildmutt crashes it. It's a funny moment, but it doesn't showcase any of the cool stuff that Clockwork can do. It is more entertaining than Edel's debut, so it's gonna get a D instead of an F tier by default. Last for the UAF aliens as a whole is Jury Rig, debuting in the episode The Eggman Cometh. Jury Rig is used twice in this episode. His first appearance is a little fun. He messes with Kevin's car and forces him to drive like Fred Flintstone. It's not a lot, and he does show up later, but UAF Jury Rig is an afterthought. Since Jury Rig's scene is at least passable, he's gonna get a C tier. The final iteration of the Prime Continuity, Omniverse, did not slack on giving new aliens. In fact, we got 16 new aliens, which is a pretty significant amount. Many of these aliens are pretty cool, but can the same be said for their first appearance? Well, let's see with the first of these new aliens, Feedback. Feedback debuts in The More Things Change Part 1. 11-year-old Ben uses Feedback to fight malware in the beginning of the episode. This scene does a pretty great job on establishing Feedback's abilities as he absorbs malware's energy and doubles it back at him. It's a pretty damn good first impression as it shows how powerful Feedback can be, so I believe it rightfully goes into A tier. The other alien to debut in The More Things Change Part 1 is Blocks. He is used by present-day Ben near the end of the episode to try to dispose of a bomb. We get some good utilization of Blocks' powers, like making himself into a dome to contain some bad guys and becoming a catapult to launch the bomb to an unpopulated area. Maybe a hot take, especially if you're a Blocks hater, but I think they did a wonderful job showcasing the potential of Blocks for his first appearance, so he gets an A tier. Next is Gravitack, who debuts in A Blast from the Past. We get a pretty good fight between Gravitack and Fistrick. The showcase of Ben discovering Gravitack's gravity manipulation is a ton of fun, and I especially love the part where he goes into his planet form and manipulates the gravity of Fistrick's missiles. I also love him just fucking with Fistrick in the water. Gravitack is an easy S tier. Crashhopper's debut is neat, but nothing crazy. He debuts in the episode It Was Them, and I like seeing him jump around like Bellamy from One Piece, but he doesn't do anything that feels extra special. He has scenes later on that I really do like, but for his first appearance, it's just fine, so he's gonna get a C tier. Ballweevil debuts in the episode of Predators and Prey Part 1. I already went into detail of my thoughts on this scene in my previous video, which was all about Ballweevil, but the TLDR version is that I love the fact that Ben has to get used to his powers for a moment, and when they do showcase Ballweevil's powers, they utilize them really well, even showing that his balls can be bigger than his own body. Yes, I know what I said. And I want to mention that I don't mind that he struggles or gets his ass kicked since he had to deal with his natural predator. An alien losing in a debut does not mean it's a bad one, except for Edel. Ballweevil can get into A tier. The episode Outbreak did something pretty interesting and gave us 5 new aliens. Having 5 new aliens in one episode is pretty insane, but sadly only one really gets time to shine in a badass way. The first alien in Outbreak is Walkatrout. Walkatrout does have it slightly better than the others, not only in screen time duration, but also that we see one of his use cases, his slipperiness. Walkatrout can get a C tier. Since he's a joke alien, I don't mind his debut not being too crazy. Next is Pesky Dust. I love Pesky Dust, he's one of my favorite Omniverse newcomers, but sadly his debut from an actual showcase standpoint is pretty bad. He just stands there pissed and then turns into another alien. It really pains me as a huge Pesky Dust fan, but I have to give him an F tier. Molestache is our third Outbreak alien, who's gonna get a D tier instead of an F tier solely for this joke.
Oh, come on! What is the point of this guy? He's totally useless. No offense, dude.
The fourth alien is the worst. He gets more screen time than the other aliens, but I think his debut is whatever. Most of his actual cool stuff has been helping the plumbers by informing them of his alien weaknesses, something any alien or Ben himself can do. His power of being indestructible is interesting, but it's not shown here, so he's gonna get a C tier. The final alien in the episode Outbreak is Kickenhawk, and his debut is awesome. After Ben scans Liam's DNA, he becomes Kickenhawk, who mops the floor with Liam. Every time Kickenhawk fights, I'm in awe of his kicking-based fighting style. This, along with my first watch of One Piece where I've become a huge Sanji fan, has made me realize how kicking-based fighting is one of the coolest styles out there. Kickenhawk's first appearance's only flaw is the fact that there's not enough of it, but it does a great job at showing how badass Kickenhawk can be. It also gets bonus points since Ben flexes by beating Liam as his own species, who he's never been before. Yeah, Kickenhawk is definitely getting S tier. The next alien is Topic, who debuts in the episode Special Delivery. I really like Topic as a concept, and his first scene does show how his ugliness can overpower someone as powerful as a dwarf star-powered siphon. What the fuck was that sentence? And the small part of me sometimes likes to think that he's not actually staring at Topic's face, but instead some sort of scary imagery, like whatever the fuck this thing is from Courage the Cowardly Dog. Topic doesn't get too much to do in Omniverse, but I do like his first appearance, so he can get a B tier. Now we're up to Astrodactyl, whose first appearance is in the episode While You Were Away. His scene does a great job showing off what his constructs are capable of, such as exploding Stardust rings. How do you hear exploding Stardust rings and not think that's sick as fuck? I will never understand Astrodactyl hate. Astrodactyl's debut can get an A tier. Bullfrag's debut in the Frogs of War Part 2, like Blitzwolfer, has a really cool twist factor. Bullfrag gets plenty of screen time, and while not all of it is him fighting, I'm giving him S tier automatically for the pretty clever twist. And of course the infamous scene where he flirts with Atea. Blame this DNA gets me every time. One Omniverse alien who has a really awesome debut is Atomics. And considering how he was briefly hyped up in Classic to be an awesome alien Ben would eventually get, I'm happy to say that his first appearance at least pays off. His first appearance is in the episode For a Few Brains More. Atomics' nuclear attacks are pretty devastating, and I love how they have names. It reminds me a lot of how Digimon attack in the anime, or how in Portrait of Ruin, Charlotte Allen will shout the names of all of her spells. Love or hate Atomics, an attack being named Nuclear Winner is so fucking raw. Like, look at this move! It's like the explosion Eggman leaves behind when you beat the Egg Viper in Adventure 1. Atomics easily gets an S tier. It's just a shame that his future appearances don't even dream of being half as cool as this one. Gutrot first appears in Animo Crackers. Gutrot's powers are pretty creative, and I'm glad we get a bit of a showcase here, and I like that he goes into a somewhat spherical stance to expel gas. Creating tear gas and a short-term memory gas that I ironically don't remember the name of is a pretty creative way to defeat both Animos. I also love that they show that he gains immense knowledge on chemicals and gases even if Ben doesn't understand how, kind of showing how the alien lifeform has influence on Ben that he can't control. Gutrot's debut can get a B tier. The final alien for today's video is Vampire, my favorite Omniverse newcomer. His first appearance is in the episode The Vampire Strikes Back, and they do some pretty neat stuff with him. For example, you have this giant explosion that reminds me of a magic burst in Dragon Quest. I also love seeing him behave like a Vladet, such as hanging upside down to think better, or flashing his fangs at Hobble. I also love that there's a role reversal here, where Vampire's Corruptoras enslaves the Scares minions, while Lord Transils controls Ben's friends. Vampire is an alien that people either love or hate, and I'm sure that people can also say that for his debut, but I personally really enjoy it. Vampire can get an A tier. It's almost perfect, but it just barely misses that S-rank material. That about does it for my personal ranking of the first appearance of every Ben 10 Omnitrix alien. The aliens of Ben 10 are essentially what makes Ben 10 what it is, or at the very least it's one of the most major parts, and I'm glad that there was care placed into the first impressions of most of these aliens. I feel like the first appearance of an alien is so important because it really sets the bar of how well that alien will be utilized throughout the whole franchise. Although of course there are exceptions like Upgrade. While his debut did a poor job showing off the potential of what Upgrade is capable of, he would end up doing some of the coolest stuff across the whole series. And of course we've also seen the reverse of this, like with Atomics. But in the very little future appearances he had in Omniverse, he didn't have much to do at all. But that's a story for another day. Sure, not every alien had a crazy first appearance, but I did like the fact that later on throughout the Ben 10 series we got more casual debuts as Ben got more and more aliens. Honestly, if I had to think about which alien had my favorite debut out of every single one that I ranked, off the top of my head my top 3 would probably be Diamondhead, Swampfire, and Goop. Those 3 debuts really knock it out of the park in terms of not only establishing the aliens' powers in cool ways, but are just so badass and entertaining. As for my least favorite alien debut, I think it's pretty obvious at this point that it's Edel. There's not doing much with an alien's first impression, and then you have Edel eating shit. But as always, I want to know what you think. How do you feel about my rankings? Do you agree with these placements, or do you think I was more generous or harsh with certain aliens than I should have been? And which alien do you think had the best and worst debut in the entire series? Perhaps one day I'll do a ranking of every alien's final appearance to coincide with this video, so if you're interested in that, let me know down in the comments below. I appreciate you guys for stopping by, and as always, happy night hunting.